Hi everyone, welcome to the ASU+GSV 2021 Summit. Thanks for logging into the panel on upskilling the world's largest source of college grads. For today's conversation, we have an incredible panel lined up with three founders building disruptive platforms that cater to unique needs of a growing learner base. Mona is the co-founder of Upraised, an upskilling platform for product management careers. Amit is the CEO of Upgrad Campus, which provides video courses and learning tools to universities. Ashish is the co-founder and CEO of Sunstone University, which operates asset-light pay-after-placement MBA programs in India. And as a quick introduction, I cover edtech investments with Blume Ventures, an early-stage VC fund in India. Thanks to three of you for joining. With the three of you here, I'm thrilled to get right into the meat of it and also help our listeners understand how you think of company building and product in this massive opportunity area. So I'm going to jump right in with my questions. Upskilling has always been a complex space in India. You're dealing with three very diverse sets of stakeholders. You have students on the one end with a very specific kind of motivation. You have recruiters on the one end and universities on the other, which have historically been a lot slower on tech adoption as well. Mona, with Upraised, you've taken a far more student-focused, learner-focused approach. Ashish, with Sunstone, you've also taken a learner-focused approach, but with formalized partnerships with universities and a lot more infra involved as well. And finally, Amit, at Upgrad, you've built a solid B2C brand over the years, but have also formalized partnerships with both recruiters and universities. How have the three of you thought of this kind of complex puzzle and the three stakeholders and the way they interact with each other? How did you pick which piece of the puzzle you started with? And maybe my more controversial question, which has been the hardest to crack for you? So let's start with Mona.
Thanks, Radhika. Firstly, thanks so much for having me on the panel. Super excited to be alongside these guys. Obviously, EdTech is a very important problem statement to solve in India, both given the size of the market as well as the implication of solving the employability gap between what is taught in the universities to what is actually required to be, to excel in the ecosystem that's getting built out very quickly, both from a startup world as well as companies kind of scaling. So our point of view on how we landed on the candidate side is not like we decided one morning and just said, okay, we're going to focus on the student. I actually did, spend about 6 months of doing research, trying to understand the problem statement from both sides. So I personally have done 127 one-on-one conversations with candidates, trying to understand what their challenges are. I've also spoken to about 70 companies, all the way from startups, all the way to the large scale, like tech Mahindras of the world. I shadowed, campus recruiting drives at IIT Bombay, few of the tier 1, tier 2 colleges. And essentially, my understanding of the problem statement, if you kind of think about it from very first principle standpoint, I realized that the biggest challenge is the quality of the candidate itself. So there are lots of recruiting tools out there that help you make the processes better. There are ATSs that help you do application tracking better so you can convert faster. There's also, just kind of focusing on the business side and saying, hey, look, tell me whatever your hiring needs are, and I'll go kind of seek out both from a passive and an active candidate and connect you to the right person. But I realized, I don't know, I felt most convinced about sort of solving the more sort of core issue, which is the quality of the candidate itself. If the quality of the candidate is good, I think a lot of other challenges kind of get solved as a side effect of that, because that seems to be the most in demand. But also that is the hardest to crack, because there is an individual that has a certain skill level and a certain baseline, and you have to take them from where they are to where they need to be. And so there's that problem statement is not just an educational problem statement, but it's sort of a user plus a technology plus a behavior plus a motivation kind of challenge problem statement that you have to think about from multiple dimensions. But that's also where my core expertise lie, because before this, I was at Airbnb for 7 years. I was the first female engineer. I started at Airbnb when there were a total of 8 engineers, and I kind of focused on what was then called acquisition, is now called growth. And focused on the consumer side, which is how do you get people excited to very hard problem for hosts to open up their homes and let strangers in. And so I understand the consumer psychology the best. And so from my perspective, I felt like we had some unique leverage in sort of solving the candidate side of the business, which is why we decided to go down that path.
Thanks, Amit. Go next.
Thanks, Radhika. And before I start, in fact, one of the things, just as a context, Upgrad Campus is the subsidiary, 100% subsidiary of Upgrad, and it focuses solely on the college, universities, as well as university space. Upgrad is more focused towards working capital in the whole higher education space. So Upgrad Campus would be the play on this thing. So as you rightly mentioned, Radhika, there are three large stakeholders: students, then there's universities and recruiters. And we have a firm view and a belief that if you want to build a mega business at a scale on this higher education thing, you have to partner and you have to attack all three. So what we have been doing at Upgrad campuses, and this is partly organic as well as through inorganic acquisition route. So Upgrad had acquired this company, Impartus, where I was the CEO and co-founder earlier, now leading Upgrad Campus, for the university partnership side. They've acquired another company, Recruit, through which they are building the whole placement engine. Right now, close to 3,000 plus jobs are being taken care by Recruit. This year, we would be reaching close to 10,000 plus jobs, and the goal is to grow it tenfold. The idea is, in India as well as globally, students just don't need learning outcomes. Learning outcomes is very important, but students need tangible benefits. And that is something that we've realized being in this game, that we need to provide students the tangible benefits, which in most cases would be either getting into either government job through test preparation or to corporate sector through placements or job opportunities. And that's a massive placement engine that we are building for placements. Now coming to the other side, universities, in fact, universities, that's my personal belief also, are like temple, like a culture. In fact, you can't replace universities. They've been there. And what's happening is universities are also adopting. So we are partnering with universities very closely to equip and empower universities to adopt to the new world. So at Upgrad Campus, we have partnerships with more than 300 plus universities. And what we are doing is providing them with cutting edge global courses, new age courses, as well as the whole tech infrastructure, the tech platform, so that our end goal of better learning outcomes and tangible benefits for students are met. So in fact, it's a well thought through strategy where we are targeting all three through B2B partnerships. And I think that would be one of the ways. And coming to your last part, I'll give a short thing, which is the toughest to crack. I think universities are the toughest to crack. Students as well as recruiters have a quite openness towards technology, whereas universities were slightly apprehensive, and there are valid reasons, because a lot of tech companies were pushing tech products down the universities. Now, that is one benefit that COVID has brought through. In fact, I'm a firm believer that the companies are getting some tailwinds out of COVID, but it's not that we are building a COVID company. But one area where we are getting benefit from COVID is universities are now quite open and eager to partner with education companies, large education companies, to transform them to a new era of online learning. So that's one thing. And they are most stickiest. Once you get a university customer, university partner, I think that those relationships are multi-year long. So it's a challenging space, but interesting.
Well, I think I agree with that. One hopes that in a post-COVID world, whenever that happens in India, both schools and colleges will kind of see digital traces of technology still remaining. Ashish, your take?
Yeah. So I'll just maybe give a slight background, and there's a reason that why we started this and why we are focusing on the consumer first business, right? So I come from a very small town in UP, and I have seen the education, the education of masses up close, and I've seen the gaps that are there exist in those educational institutions, the kind of skills the students lack, and it's both, as Mona also mentioned, that it's both behavioral and the skill side, which we have to work very closely with the students, right? So if you look at in this whole puzzle of student recruiters and corporates, who needs your product the most? And there's a very simple answer to that: the students need your product the most, because you are really impacting one life at a time. So let's say if there are 2,000 students who are studying in Sunstone, you are actually impacting 2,000 lives, and you're actually impacting 2,000 families, essentially. So if you look at, that's a very clear answer, that if you have to build, you have to build a student first organization, right? And now in this whole puzzle, why, let's say, Sunstone or why anyone else is going degree first, if you look at that, lot of sort of a framework or sort of a landscape in India, the colleges and universities are struggling badly because of the poor fill rate. And if you, let's say, compare it against China, the fill rate are 18 to 20 times lesser than what a typical college in China would have. And that means that the colleges do not have resources to spend on student education, technological adaptability, curriculum, nothing, right? Now, if a college doesn't have resources, they cannot provide good quality education to the student. Now let's say, if as an organization, if I am going and trying to sell something to the universities, if they don't have resources, they obviously will not be able to do any justice in that case as well. So the thought process that we have is that you have to build more of a B2B2C kind of a product, where you are responsible for not only providing products to the university, but you are creating sort of a whole complete stack kind of a solution, right? Wherein you should also be responsible for creating demand as well. So if you are creating a better education product and you end up creating more and more demand, then the universities which you have partnered with will also end up benefiting. So it's sort of a win-win situation that you can create, but it has to start from a demand first kind of a product. So yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I was just answering your second question. So let's say if you look at these partnerships, whether you end up doing it with the colleges or recruiters, they are sort of a good short-term growth hacks, I would say, or short-term growth spurts that can give you. But in the longest term, let's say in 5 to 7 years down the line, if you have to create a really large, impactful education company, then you have to create a brand of your own. And that's where like everything matters, that if you are able to create a better education product for consumers or not. And to answer your last question, yes, cracking consumer in any business is always the hardest.
So what I'm hearing from the three of you is consumer really lies, the student in this case really lies at the center of the puzzle. Universities act as a great top of funnel, and recruiters act as a great kind of ending, sixer, if for those of you who get the cricket reference from India, to the entire funnel. And I suppose that it's true that to build anything in edtech, a lot like say healthcare, your brand is kind of foremost, because an entire family is trusting in what you built as a brand for, as Ashish correctly pointed out, the future social mobility, income, etc. of the person that they're going with.
Yeah, and
I think just
more,
given the
more
importance
importantly, sorry, just one more point. So more importantly, if you look at, the student is trusting you with his career, because if you look at from higher education perspective, at least the business which we are in, student will not repeat his post graduation or graduation program again. So it's more than the money, it's the lifetime tag that he is getting with you.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of, yeah, one and done. I think just given the importance also of how important an upskilling product plays in the life of a student, there's been so much regulation recently in India as well. The NEP, the New Education Policy 2020, came after several years. I think the previous one is a couple of years older than me. Did a lot of work for higher ed as well. There's also been so much regulation around UGC permitting more online degree courses, allowing hybrid programs, enabling easier partnerships across public parties, private parties. My next question is Amit and Ashish. How do you, as players in the market that also work with universities so closely, how do you think this policy will now open up more routes for you to approach a consumer? And how do you think the overall policy momentum in India over the next couple of years will shape up upskilling in higher education over the next decade or so? Maybe we can start with Ashish.
Sure. So, if you look at higher education, the way we see it is, there are two parts of higher education. One is the segment where student is going to the college, and second is more continual education. Now, if you look at NEP, it actually speaks for both. One is the OL program, which is the online degree program. So essentially, if you look at, that's more rebranding of the ODL program. And ODL program has always been there, which is more of a continual learning kind of a program. And in ODL earlier, just quickly deep diving into it, from regulation perspective, earlier a learner has to go to a center to give examination, maybe attend some classes on weekends, which is now completely taken away in online degree program. So yes, there definitely is going to some spike. There is definitely more and more number of students who will enroll in the online degree program. But what we believe is that it is not going to take away the market share from the full-time education program, because the demand for full-time or the need for a full-time education program is very different from an online or a ODL sort of a program. In case of a full-time education program, it's more of a life stage for me, that if I've completed my class 12th, I will definitely go and attend a college. So we don't think that colleges will be replaced by the online degree program. They will definitely be a add-on, or in the continual learning, there will be there's a definitely very large market sitting out there for online programs. Now, looking at like how the future will look like, so our sense is that it will not be like in isolation, that either online program will succeed or full-time program will succeed. And that's how we see regulation is also moving towards, where players like regulators like UGC are also prescribing a lot of hybrid programs. Like they are now allowed around 40% teaching in full-time program, which can be done online or through MOOCs or through asynchronous classes, right? So the way we see is that that college element in higher education, which is my life stage or my peer group, my interactions with my buddies, extracurricular activities, these things will definitely have a say, will continue to remain there. But yeah, the programs will definitely move towards more hybrid sort of an education going forward.
No, absolutely. I think we're seeing the same thing, where if you move it completely online, you lose so much of the essence of education, which is
That's
not just a classroom. There's so much more beyond that.
Yeah, so
Amit,
think
what would be
actually
your
think
take
it
on
from the perspective of a student who completed class 12th. Now he's not planning to do BBA. He's planning to move out of his father's home. So that is difficult. That online will replace that.
absolutely? Amit, over to you.
Yeah, Radhika, in fact, I see a lot of regulatory changes happening in this space. In fact, I remember when I was into job as a VC investor, we had invested into Manipal Group. That was 2006 or 2007, long back. And the biggest risk we identified was the regulation risk. How building a large business in partnership with universities, or trying to build something online, would be difficult given the regulatory environment. And this problem of unemployability or the employability challenges, I think that has been there for decades. I think the timing is now very right to solve it. And that's aided by some amount of very open changes when we interact with government. So NEP, coming to NEP side, I think NEP people criticize that it's generic. It doesn't have specific steps, but I think it's a beautiful document in guiding. In fact, some of the things that they've talked about at NEP level, increasing the gross enrollment ratio from 26% currently to 50%. And that's a massive jump given the size of India. We have talked about how technology in education would come, how universities and colleges would get phased autonomies. So those are the guiding principles. But the beauty, Radhika, that's happening in this space, in the university space and regulation, is not at NEP, but below the policies that are coming out because of this NEP. So as Ashish mentioned, UGC has invited industry as well as companies to comment on for credit courses. I think that's a massive change. I'll describe it a bit. So what UGC is saying is every college, every university would be allowed to adopt a blended mode of teaching. So up to 40% of each course at a university or a college can be taught online, and 60% can be taught online. And this blended mode gives the universities and colleges a great flexibility. And for each of these courses, credits would be there. Then there are a whole lot of other programs that UGC is permitting. For leading colleges, you can have for credit courses, you can have online degrees. and each one of them would be aiding the sector. Now, what will happen at the ground level through these policy decisions would be lot of universities would be looking to power with leading education brands or online education brands to get in those capabilities in-house. I don't think universities would quickly be able to build those capabilities, which are not necessarily native to these universities. But while I'm talking to a lot of leading universities in India as well as globally, one thing is very clear. This regulation change is not only specific to India, it's a global phenomena. And most of the universities are looking to partner with leading education companies to build this capability. At the end, this would result in better learning outcomes for students. The whole focus of education companies, as we've been seeing, is towards learner outcomes, and that will aid both universities as well as education companies like Upgrad.
So what I'm hearing is there is a lot of expectation kind of riding on just better policy changes happening over the next couple of years. And what has happened over the last, say, 18 to 20 months on changing up the higher ed space, and both in terms of what learning outcomes it drives, and in terms of who can give a degree, who can get a degree, and what kind of education the degree is structured behind. And as a country, we've really been very, very, degree driven. And I'm sure our listeners from LATAM will kind of relate to this problem as well. And so when the early, wave of edtech companies kind of came up in the upskilling space, they were very certification driven as well. But Mona, with Upraised, you've taken a slightly different approach in problem solving. It's a lot more hands-on, more learner focused, and a lot with a much lesser focus on certifications kind of being a pivotal part of the project. How do you think of pedagogy in this space? Why the lower focus on certifications than most of your other peers? How does this change the kind of user that you're able to get on the platform that you target? Yeah. And the last part of this is, how do you think elements of this, the more hands-on model, need to change, if at all, at massive scale?
Yeah, so one of the core things that we wanted to focus on was like everybody on this panel has mentioned, outcome is the most important thing, right? People want to get educated, not to have a degree saying, hey, look, I'm a graduate from this university and this university and this university and this university, right? Ultimately, that degree or that certificate is desired because it's a gateway to a better job, to a better life, to a better outcome in your life, to just overall better quality of life for you, right? And so as we were thinking through the problem statement of what we wanted to solve, we realized that the largest gap towards getting that outcome is actually personalizing the learning journey itself, right? Because everyone has a slightly different starting point, and everyone, because of a slightly different starting point, may end up in a slightly different situation. So somebody that comes from a mechanical engineering degree in IIT Guwahati will likely be at a slightly different starting point than somebody coming from even a mechanical engineering degree from Mumbai University, right? But if they both go to the same certification in the coursework and desire a job, let's say at a Zomato, their probability of getting an outcome might be slightly different, right? And so if our core focus is going to be the outcome, then we need to personalize it based on who this individual is, what their starting point is, right? And just by the virtue of having to personalize means that we cannot certify, because certification requires you to have a greatest common denominator across all people, across all skills, and a standardized way of knowing whether people meet a certain threshold or not, right? And so we actually evaluated the pros and cons and said, okay, if we focus on certification, we can't do the personalization. If we can't, but in the short term, there are a lot of benefits to doing certification, because it creates trust amongst students a lot faster. The second is it's also a lot more scalable, because you can certify a lot more people than get people jobs, right? So our model at Upraised, what is unique about us is we give you a job guarantee. So when you join our program, you take a test. This is how we know that you have a certain threshold from where we can take you to the outcome, which is the job. And we invite you to join the program, which is a career accelerator plan, which is 16 weeks. And in those 16 weeks, we guarantee you a job. If we can't get you the job, we refund you the full amount, right? So for us, that outcome is core. And if we wanted to drive that outcome, we had to personalize it. There was no way to just certify to get that outcome. So that's the view we kind of took, which is we wanted to hold ourselves to the standard of outcome for as long as we can. I'm not saying we figured out this problem statement at scale and we'll be able to get 1 million people jobs, but even if we very early we kind of made this choice of, even if we can get 50,000 people the jobs that they deserve or the jobs they desire, then that impact to us was a lot, it felt a lot more tangible and a lot more sort of impactful, because like Ashish said, it's not an individual, you're actually changing the life of the entire family and the life of the next generation, because the ambition, the drive, the confidence that drives is just phenomenal. And more importantly, I don't know about you guys, but like growing up in a tier 1 city, you live a very privileged life. Like you have access to a lot of things. When you actually go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, the smarts exist, the drive exists, the motivation is actually even higher than people in tier 1 cities, right? But they just don't know how to navigate the path. And certification is obviously one step in that direction, but ultimately there's still a gap between getting certified to getting that job, and that's when most people get stuck. So we said if we wanted to go the full path, we had to let go of the certificate, because that gives us the leverage to actually do personalization, which to us was very crucial, getting that outcome, which is the job, right? And so we made this choice saying, okay, even if we get 50,000 people jobs and we may not have numbers like 5 million people placed, it's still more impactful, it is still more fulfilling, at least for me as a founder and for us as a team. And so that's the route we took. There are some obvious kind of benefits to being outcome driven, at least as a startup. I think because our North Star metric is the placement, it drives us to actually increase the standard of the education we provide, because we can't really hide under the rug and say, hey, look, we taught you everything, but sorry, you couldn't get a job, right? We have to teach you, because ultimately, if you don't get employed, we have to give you all the money back. So we can't really hide ourselves. And so that actually defined our pedagogy, which you talked about, which is, it is actually, the reason it is more hands-on is because it is tied to employment. So we had to make it more hands-on, right? We had to teach you the skills for today. We had to get you exposed to the tools of today. We had to teach you how to work in a team. We had to teach you how to, actually ship a great product. We had to teach you how to live in this ecosystem, how to build your own personal brand, how to get that interview, how to crack it, how to build a resume, how to build a portfolio. It just pushed us to do a lot more things because our outcome was tied to a job and it wasn't just certification. So that's sort of the choice we made. And so a lot of the curriculum that we teach today is we've kind of built it as Lego blocks, right? And so it's modular in the sense that, how to do competitive analysis remains the same, but how much of it is needed for Radhika might be different than how much of it is needed for Ashish, right? And so kind of taking that and saying, okay, he only needs half a piece of a Lego block versus she needs a full piece of Lego block, or somebody else needs actually 2 pieces of Lego blocks. And so kind of go in that depth, right? And the curriculum is designed by practicing product managers, which is why it also gets updated on a very frequent basis. So every 3 months, we do a curriculum update, which is kind of an unheard iterative process in a university setting. It's almost impossible. You can't. But in a real life setting, in your job, you actually do upgrade your tools every 3 to 6 months, right? You may move from using an analytics tool. Back in the day, everybody used Google Analytics, and a lot of startups still use that. But now people have moved to Segment, Amplitude, things have changed. So you have to kind of keep up with it. And that's only really possible if you actually engage with practicing product managers who are also in the pulse of, knowing what is the latest and the greatest, right? So a lot of our curriculum is both designed by practicing product managers. It is taught by practicing product managers. 90% of what students do in our coursework is actually hands-on. So they take a real life problem statement, they break it down, and they get feedback on a daily basis. Whether they've thought about this problem statement the right way, have they gone in the depth the way they're supposed to? Did they actually try to just get to the answer, or are we training them to think, right? Because in product management, there's no binary outcome. There's no like, you know the answer or you don't know the answer. The same problem can be solved 100 ways. And each of these 100 ways might be right given the context you're in, right? And the priority that you have, the resources that you have. There are just so many constraints that you have to kind of consider. So I think because of being outcome driven, that we have to get somebody a job, a lot of our curriculum, our pedagogy, how we update the curriculum had to be hands-on, because without that hands-on culture, you can't get somebody employed. And I think I don't know, but I I've obviously done my master's in the US, and I can say that there's a stark difference between what I did in my master's program versus what I did in my bachelor's program here, right? In the bachelor's program, I graduated with a degree in computer science, but I had written like 2 programs in my entire life, right? 2 pieces of code. But in the US, like in my first day of going to the university, I had to start on a project, right? So I think a lot of our educational degrees are so theory driven that actually breaking a person out of that and getting them into the hands-on culture takes a little bit of the transition. But once they get in it, the difference in confidence you see in the individual to be able to have a conversation, to be able to crack a job interview, to be able to actually excel at that job is very different than people that I've seen kind of just go through the curriculum and they kind of when you're listening to people talk to you about product management, give you gyan about it, like it feels all great because it is true. It can be, it sounds great. But when you actually walk a mile in the shoe of that product manager, you're lost every second. You don't know how to connect the dots. You're like, should I do this? Should I do that? Like you're always Googling, trying to figure out what to do, And so getting that hands-on training gives them that confidence. And that to us has been the greatest contributor for, we have a 96% placement rate. So, and we've placed 80 people. So it's not like a very small pool of people. We've only been in existence for 15 months. And the reason we've been able to do that is because of this hands-on culture, because they feel confident, because they go to their interview, they know what they're talking about. It's not just like watch the video, know the keywords, know the terminology. They know actually how to use it. So yeah, that's sort of the downside of, the reason why, because we wanted to keep it hands-on, because it was the job that was the ultimate outcome. We had to do away with the certification because that just has too many limitations to actually getting this person the job.
Well, it's very interesting what you said about kind of starting point of each person, because in our country, as unbelievably diverse as us, we tend to split education in terms of age group and K-12 versus upskilling. But there is a whole other form of slicing and dicing that we don't do, which is around just where your starting point is. And as you grow older, away from K-12 more towards upskilling, that starting point, gap becomes wider and wider.
Yeah, we actually have. Yeah, and we actually have people going through the same Lego configuration. Somebody who is not even graduated out of college, and somebody who is with 8 to 10 years of experience, but in a slightly different vertical. Yeah. Because the exposure level that they've had is slightly different, and so their starting points are somewhat similar.
Fascinating. I'm going to jump to my last question. This is a little bit for me to selfishly get a sneak peek into how you think as founders. When you think back to company building and for CU, it's been kind of broken up in different pieces. With Mona, it's been both across Airbnb and Upraised, with Amit again with Upgrad Campus and Impartus. What is one decision that you've made as a founder? It could be a good decision or a bad decision, or a hire you made or something you chose not to do, that you think has really completely changed the game for you in terms of what you're building? Let's start with Amit.
So, Radhika, I'll not tell about one decision per se, but I'll tell you one of the approaches that worked for me personally as a founder. Both in my earlier, in fact, 7 years back, I had a failed startup, and this touchwood has been going really great. One of the things that has worked for us is reaching out, seeking help. In fact, I've dropped a lot of cold emails to who's who in the industry. And surprisingly, as a young entrepreneur, the kind of receptiveness that I see from people willing to help edtech founders, I think partly because education is a business of trust, I've actually seen other education founders, other people helping. In fact, I remember my first big large channel partnership with Pearson was through a cold mail where I reached out to pick their brain. My first Series A funding from Kaizen Private Equity was through a cold mail, reaching out, asking some help. In fact, even this current M&A was discussing with Upgrad, reaching out to them, seeking bouncing of ideas. So many times as a founder, I've realized that one decision is throw that fear of what do I say, rejection or non-hearing back, and reach out to people. And whenever I've done that, that's changed the course of my startup.
Oh, that's. I also like how you put a lot of pressure on a whole bunch of other edtech founders out there to be more responsible. So that's helpful to everybody.
And I was an introvert, so it takes a lot of courage to reach out to write a cold mail to someone whom you don't know. That what would the person they say? Don't reply. So but fortunately, Radhika, I've seen majority of the mails or reaching out got replied, and maybe it's to do with the edtech sector in general. It's quite, people want this sector to succeed, and people who are associated with this sector are playing the long-term game.
No, that's incredible. Also, thank you for the sneak peek into how conversations began in the first place between Upgrad and Employers. Mona, what about you?
I mean, there's a couple of decisions, but one of the key decisions is aligning the team to this North Star metric of placement rate, because it just forces us to be super diligent, to take our responsibility of guiding somebody's career very, very seriously, because the implication is not, for us, it might just seem like getting them a job. For them, it is a stepping stone towards their career. And with every job they get, they're going to either open more doors or shut more doors. And if you're not diligent about that process and don't take that responsibility seriously, I think it's very easy to misguide people. I often tell my team, it's like you can do less harm by not guiding, but you can do a lot of harm by misguiding, because in that moment of vulnerability, when somebody is coming to you for guidance, when you give them whatever you give them, they take it very seriously, right? So you either misguide them. If you don't know, the second decision is there is one of the core values we focus on is just intellectual honesty, right? It's absolutely okay to say, I don't know an answer to this and I will get back to you. But do not misguide people. Don't just give an answer for the heck of giving an answer, right? The implications are very large, right? And so there are many times when I've gone back to people and said, hey, look, I understand you want to be here, but I'm not sure I can get you there, right? Like, give me some time to figure this out for you. Or I'll just honestly tell them, hey, look, you can't be not a product manager and suddenly become a product manager at Google. You're going to have to take baby steps to get there. So sort of having that intellectual honesty and sort of holding ourselves to the standard of either we get somebody placed or we just give up all our money, right? That just puts things in perspective in terms of how we align our incentives inside the team, the quality that we focus on. I think that has been one of the hardest decisions, especially because we started the company like 2 months before COVID. And in COVID, we had a very weird problem because we had a lot of people come to us wanting to get placed. So on the candidate side, we just saw a massive surge in demand. But for us, because we are outcome driven, we have to get somebody placed to get that money. We didn't have companies that were willing to hire. Everybody was on a hiring freeze. They didn't know where to go. How much do they want to hire? Do they want to retain their old people? Would they want to hire new people? It was just like a frenzy of like unknown for the next 3-4 months, right? And so it was very hard for 6 months for us because there was just a lot of uncertainty. But what worked for us was, again, taking the stance that we're going to be outcome driven. We either make it or break it. And because we were outcome driven, we were forced in the time that nobody was hiring to just focus on the quality of the education we gave them. Because we said, okay, you know what? When the floodgates open, our guys should be the first one that get hired, right? That's the only focus we have for the next 3 months because we have 0 companies that are coming to hire from us right now. So all we are going to go is make sure everybody is the best they can be. And then we leave the rest to whenever it opens up, right? That's beyond us. Like we can't obsess about it. And so, in hindsight, I feel like that's the best decision we made. Again, time will tell how much we can scale with this approach and this attitude. But we want to hold on to that value for as long as we can because I just think it forces us to be better every single day.
Yeah, it also drives on the point of that Amit was making of trust being the kind of crux of any education business.
Correct. Yeah.
Ashish, how about you?
Yeah. So again, I'll take a slight moment here. So this is something that happened sometime last year, the decision that we took. But why we had to take that decision and what was we not doing right is also very important. So when we started this journey, we were always trying to push what we wanted to push to the students, which can be a job, which can be a pay after placement program, it can be anything, right? And then we realized that because we are sitting in the more formal education market, what we are offering in terms of pay after placement to the students is something which has to be like a cherry on the cake, right? You cannot not have everything that a student expects from a degree program. So you cannot not have the best, let's say, extracurricular activities. best curriculum, everything that you're doing has to be best, and then you can offer pay after placement on top of it. So that's, and when you are focusing a lot on pay after placement, what eventually was happening is that we are becoming more of a skills company where we are providing skills to the student, and students are eventually getting into jobs essentially. But student expectations were always that we want best when I'm coming to my college. So either it has to be my training, either it has to be my extracurricular activities, my faculties, everything has to be really the best, right? So that's something that we changed slightly over a time of COVID, which is probably what stark difference what Mona is doing currently. So we started with that. We continue to do pay after placement, but now the focus is more and more on providing a holistic education experience to the student. It's not that we have moved away from pay after placement. What we have started doing is that we started giving options to the student, whether you want to come for pay after placement or you want to come from the upfront fee model. To our surprise, 40% of the students started opting for the upfront fee model, right? So that is one big decision that we took, which is more understanding what your student wants. Because when you are talking about a higher education program, a degree program, student is not just looking for a job. And if you do surveys and everything, you always will get to see that placement is the most important criteria. But undercurrents is that something that you have to read is that other parts of education is equally, if not more important for the students, right? So that's something that we slightly changed, wherein we, if you look at our branding, messaging, our communication everywhere, now we are talking about our education product, our education quality. Because if you think from a student perspective, as I initially also mentioned, it doesn't matter to the student if you're providing pay after placement or not, because there are close to a crore students who enroll in higher education program in our country, and they're already paying for that. So by providing pay after placements or sort of no upfront fee model, is you are basically establishing a trust with them, which is and that's what helps you attract a lot of demand as well. But it does not mean that that's the pitch or that's the product that you're offering. It's just a good sort of a, I would say, a growth hack or a good GTM for you. But ultimately what you should always talk about is your product, which has to be a much better education product in whichever segment you are operating.
A lot of it's really driven by understanding what the student is looking for, both in terms of pricing and how they want to approach that, and also what they're really looking for in the course of their education, which, as you said, is very multifaceted.
Yeah, and
no, this was
one sort of an interesting thing, which now as we are also graduating, we're on third year. So even in PG and UG, the kind of trend that we are seeing is that around 20% student who started with pay after placements has now opted out completely of the placements. And there are a lot of interesting cases. So there was a girl who came to us and she said that I want to pursue a career in choreography, but I want my MBA degree. So I'll pay you. I don't mind paying you, but I don't want placements. So student, when they are coming there, because it's more of their a natural progression of their life that they will go to college. So your job as an education provider is to provide them with the best education product, best education experience, and obviously they're free to do whatever they want to do with their lives.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. That's fascinating how that process is changing as well. Mona, Amit, Ashish, thank you so much for taking out the time for this and these incredible insights. I've loved this conversation, and it's just given me so much to take back. And as I think more about upskilling from an investing point of view, and I'm sure it's also given our viewers a great sneak peek in how you've built these incredible companies over the last couple of years. So thanks for taking out the time and logging in. And to everyone who's logged in to watch, thank you for joining, and hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you.
Thanks, Radhika.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Radhika, for having us.